Finally, Joe is here. And now you may think, why? Joe is invested in BAM from the very, very early ages, when nobody really heard of it, nobody actually knew it so much, and she has invested much and much over time, together with your husband. And so we are very happy to have you here, and we are looking forward to everything I have to share.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. Sorry, I have a cold, so I hope you can understand me. But yeah, I'm so blessed to be among you. And I've been asked to speak about what is business's mission, what is BAM. And I think that we can discover a lot about business's mission by unpacking these two questions. What is business for? And what is on God's heart for mission? Because this is God's idea, and we just want to hear from him of what he's doing and join in with him. And we did not coordinate this at all, but actually my opening verse here is also from Deuteronomy 8, which is wonderful. I think, we need to hear this. It is God who gives us the ability to create wealth, but he says, don't forget me while you're doing it. In Deuteronomy 8, they're at the point, this is Israel, they're about to go in the promised land. They've been wandering around in the desert for a long time. And how have they eaten? God has been supernaturally providing manna for them. Their clothes haven't worn out. God's been providing for them. And at this point in the story, God's giving them directives for when they go into the promised land of what the new normal is going to be like, because they haven't had normal for a long time. We can also read about this moment in history in Joshua 5:12, where really it describes Israel camped out. They're in the plains of Jericho. They're about to take Jericho, but they're celebrating Passover. And then very next day, they eat some of the produce of the land. And then the day after that, what happens? The manna stops. Suddenly the manna stops. And why is this so important? It's because although God does give us supernatural provision in our businesses, and you're going to be hearing some stories from Bill about that, but business is God's normal way of providing for people, families, communities, and nations. Business is good. It's God's idea. And so when God describes the promised land in Deuteronomy 8 and prepares them for going in, he doesn't say there's going to be piles of manna for you to collect. He said there'll be vineyards and fields. There's going to be iron and copper to dig out of the hills. He said, work hard, be creative, start copper mines, agricultural businesses. That's how you're going to provide for your household, your community, the poor, and out of that, give generously to take care of the poor. And he says, I'm giving you this land, but you are going to work hard, you're going to start businesses, but crucially, don't forget me while you're doing it. Remember me, honor me. So I think this is important because sometimes as business people, we haven't felt affirmed in our call to business, and we need to recognize that it's God's idea. So before we even get onto business as mission, we've got three key principles already. That it's God that gives us these abilities in business to create wealth, as we've already heard. That business is God's design. It's part of his plan for human flourishing. And number three, we can honor God as we're doing business and listen to him and what he's saying in our everyday business life. So business is good, but God reminds us not to forget him as we're doing it. Wealth is a sign of God's blessing, and I love the opening that we heard this morning. But it shouldn't be a substitute for God's friendship. And Bill's going to bring that theme in of how we're friends with God in our business life. I can't wait to hear that. But what is business's mission? It's built on these foundations of the natural God-given design for business. It's got those God-given attributes built into it. Business drives forward innovation through creativity, taking risk and hard work. It multiplies wealth through the stewardship of resources and labor. Business can create good jobs and provide livelihoods to people who need it most. And it's, as we've heard, the primary way that families and communities provide for themselves, and then we can be generous out of that abundance. It also brings needed products and services into places and drives development in human society. And a role in business gives us a voice within our own companies, but also in our community and nation. Even as we do things like pay taxes, we get to have a voice. So business helps humans flourish. So what I want to say right at the beginning is we don't have to attach a mission strategy to business in order for it to glorify God, do we? And do good. However, I've spent the last 20 years championing this idea of business as mission. So that's what I want. We need to build on that biblical foundation of business, though. Business is good and it has intrinsic value. It's valuable in its very nature. But it also has instrumental value. We can use it very intentionally as an instrument for God's mission. I think about it a bit like water and wind. And here I am in the Netherlands. You guys are masters at taking water and wind and channeling it into something more. Water and wind has natural abilities to do things, good and bad actually, but it's a blessing. But if we take that power of water and wind and harness it and channel it, then we can do so much more with it. And business as mission is like that. It's taking just harnessing the God-given intrinsic potential of business to address the world's most pressing needs. And also, as we're doing that, showing people what the kingdom of God is like. Or as a little bit shorter, it's releasing the power of business in God's missional plan for the world. Business as mission very intentionally brings business and mission together. It's not just adjacent, like I'm doing business and I'm doing mission over there, although there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. It's not about having a little bit of overlap. It's about when the business and the mission strategy, the mission intent, the mission goals and objectives are so meshed into the business model, you can't see where one begins and the other ends. And you'll be hearing stories today about what that looks like. So I spend my life championing the idea of business as mission because I have a firm belief and a passion about this, that business know-how, business gifts and experience, entrepreneurial gifts and business professional building gifts are one of the most needed in contemporary mission today. The world has many issues, and we're going to be hearing about those over the next 2 years. And God is raising up, He's calling business people, He's calling entrepreneurs, He's calling professionals to bring business solutions to the world's most pressing issues. And we need to mobilize those with the entrepreneurial gift. And I love the theme of this conference, have courage, entrepreneurs and business people. I once heard a speaker, his name was Steve Saint. He said something which I wrote down because I thought it was brilliant. He said, in our society, he was American, but I think it applies here in Europe too, we become what we celebrate. And he was talking about the church. He was saying we need to celebrate the role of business people in the kingdom of God. We need to stop celebrating one call or one role over another call or role, because business is a high calling. And we need to celebrate it so that our children and their children know that if they're called to business, then that's what they should be doing to God's glory, to the glory of God. And Steve Saint is actually the son of a very famous missionary called Nate Saint. You may not have heard of him. He went into the jungles in South America and actually was martyred. So Steve is an entrepreneur. He invents things, actually an inventor, I'd say more. And he was saying that, you know, if God has called you to be a mission worker, great. If he's called you to be a pastor, fantastic. If he's called you to be a nurse, brilliant. But if he's called you to do business, do it to God's glory. And I love this quote from J.D. Greer. Oh no, that's the rest of Steve's quote, sorry. Oh, sometimes we have this unbiblical thinking about vocational calls. That we think, well, we do in the UK anyway, I don't know about the Netherlands, I can't speak for you. But we sometimes feel like if we really want to serve God in the church, we hear this message, then we need to become a pastor or a missionary. And maybe if we're doing some caring profession or doing some good in the world, that's kind of also good. But often business people kind of find themselves down here and they're wondering, like, they're the lowest of the pile. But of course, this isn't how God sees it, is it? This is rubbish. It's not true. Whatever we're called to, we should be doing it for God's glory. So I hope you feel affirmed, business people. I wanted to start with that encouragement for you. And this is the quote that I was looking for. Whatever you're good at, do it well for the glory of God. And do it somewhere strategic for the mission of God. J.D. Greer. So tomorrow we're going to look at a little bit about why business is mission. But today I just want to talk a little bit more about what business as mission is. I want to just clarify some terms. It's a little different for business for mission. Business for mission is sometimes the word that we use for making money and then giving that to ministry, and there is nothing wrong with this. That's good. This is not a value judgment. It's just unpacking what business as mission is all about. We need to release finances and give them to other kinds of ministries. But business as mission is about releasing more untapped resources from the church. We're releasing business skills, business people. We do also need investments, business investments, and I know here in BAM Netherlands, you guys have a group looking at that. How can we get investment funds to start BAM businesses? So we often say that business's mission is intentionally aimed, they're for-profit businesses intentionally aiming for impact on 4 bottom lines in response to 3 biblical mandates from God. And so what do I mean by that? And I'm going to spend the rest of the time that I'm speaking unpacking that more. And the 3 biblical mandates are creation mandate, God's command to us in Genesis to look after creation and flourish as human beings. In Genesis 1, we've already talked a little bit about that. Then the great commandment to love God and then love our neighbor. And then, of course, the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all nations. And I'll be talking more about that when we talk about why business is mission tomorrow, because we're responding to God's missional heart that we see in the Bible. He seeks relationship, and he wants to bring restoration, and we can do that powerfully through business, as we seek to have impact on 4 bottom lines. So I'm going to talk about 4 bottom lines. What is a bottom line? What is the term in Dutch? It's in a financial bottom line. You business people can tell me. What is?
Same word.
Same word. Okay. You know. So at the bottom of your profit and loss sheet, if you're in the black, it's good. If you're in the red, it's bad, and that's your financial bottom line. And the whole point of business is to have a positive financial bottom line and bring return to your shareholders, whoever owns the company. So in business's mission, we need to keep that. It is for profit. We need for-profit, Christ-centered solutions to strategic global issues, to bring scalable, sustainable impact and transformation. So we need the business part. We recognize that actually, it does take time to be profitable, and there are kinds of social enterprise that have multiple kind of sources of income. But in general here, in business's mission, we're talking about for-profit. It's because making money, wealth creation is part of God's design. But business's mission also recognizes that there are multiple stakeholders. There's more than just the shareholders of the business. And this is something that society in general is waking up to in social enterprise. How can we have a greater impact on society, impacting people, making sure that we're taking care of the planet, thinking about the impact on our community, our employees, and also our environment. But also that God is a stakeholder of our business. Actually, I know Bill is going to come and say God is the owner of our business. And I agree with that. Sorry, Bill, I'm stealing your line. God is a real owner of our business, the most important stakeholder, as we are his stewards. And this is where we get the idea of BAM in the four bottom lines, or the quadruple bottom line of financial, social, environmental, and spiritual impact, or profit, people, planet, and proclaiming God's gospel, which is all part of his purpose. All of this is part of his purpose. So I want to just briefly touch on each bottom line of business as mission. There you go. People, purposes, planet, and profit, among all peoples. We need to be commercial. A few years ago, I read this article, and I actually read it again yesterday. I encourage you. I'm gonna try and send the link somewhere. I've got a QR code for it. It was an article on CNN by a Christian who'd worked in the Middle East, and he was saying, what he was saying is that missionaries or people shouldn't pretend to do business. That's really damaging. He was saying that, and I love this quote in the, he says, missionaries should stop posing as aid workers, teachers, and business people. He wasn't against business as mission, but he said, if you dare to say you're a business person, working with people at the height of human suffering, then by God, be great at it. We need to be excellent in business. In the early days of business as mission, there were some people sort of just faking it, not pretending to do business, and they weren't really doing business. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about doing excellent business. And sometimes we do have business failures. Business is hard. It's hard to be profitable. But we should have a commercial strategy at the core. I'm going to talk a little bit more about social, environmental, and spiritual impact tomorrow when I'm talking about the 3 biblical mandates. But today, and I know some of you aren't going to be here tomorrow, so I wanted to talk about this briefly. All businesses have the potential to have a positive social impact. We can think about how we're treating our employees, what impact our products are making, use our platform or our position, our role, our respected role in the community to have an impact. But then I think we also can think really intentionally and strategically about businesses that come up with innovative social solutions, that are looking at the world's most pressing social needs. And a big one of that is the lack of jobs. And business in itself creates jobs. What our neighbor in the Great Commandment, God says, love your neighbor as yourself and love me. What our neighbor often needs most is a good, dignified job. And then the environmental bottom line. Again, all businesses can be good environmental stewards. And we've actually in BAM Global, the network I work with, we're just in the process of publishing a 4-part series of reports on businesses' mission and creation care that I know ARCO has been part of that process, that working group, looking at how we need to think about the environment as businesses' mission people, and encouraging all of us as Christian business people to think about being better environmental stewards. But another side of that is that we can come up with, as entrepreneurs listening to the Lord, we can come up with innovative new business solutions to some of the world's most pressing environmental issues. I don't know about you, but when I look at TV programs and look at what's happening, I feel alarmed. But God has given us the entrepreneurial gift. And what we want to see is a new wave of businesses released to address some of these pressing environmental issues. And I'm going to share some stories and ideas about that tomorrow. And then the spiritual bottom line. We're all called to share the gospel and disciple people, but we can be intentional and innovative about taking the gospel into places through business where it's hard to reach. We're marginalized people in our own environment here in the Netherlands and Europe, about people who would otherwise not have access to the gospel, or they have more pressing needs first before we can share the gospel with them. But also to places where it's difficult to go if you're a traditional mission worker, into places that have never heard about Jesus. But the world is open for business and we can go and take the gospel to people. And again, I want to remind you that business's mission is integrated. Yes, when we're planning a business, we think about these 4 bottom lines: commercial, spiritual, we want to plan and evaluate. But the reality is, in everyday business life, everyday company life, those are integrated together. What we do socially impacts spiritually. What we do environmentally impacts commercially. There's no kind of divide. It's all woven together in the core of the business model. Although we can be intentional when we're evaluating how we're doing on these 4 points, we can be very intentional about thinking about that. Okay, we often say business's mission is a concept, it's a practice, and it's a global movement. And I've been talking about the concept of business's mission so far. It's a concept that's deeply rooted in biblical principles. We can see examples of it throughout our church history, and I'm going to be talking in a workshop later a little bit about lessons that we can learn from when business's mission has gone together in history. But we can see that business is part of God's design for human flourishing and how we can intentionally make an impact in response to God's missional heart through our enterprises. But it's also a practice. It's a set of daily operating procedures for companies around the world. In every continent today, there are business mission practitioners intentionally demonstrating the kingdom of God in their daily business life. They're bringing the whole gospel in word and deed, and they're aiming to have a positive impact. BAM in practice. And here are some pictures from BAM stories around the world. Just one of them, that lady holding the flowers at the bottom there, she's in a Nepali village in the trekking country in Nepal. And there's a business there in Nepal called 514. They've been working in ministry in that area for quite a while. There was one guy became a Christian, but then he was ousted by his community, a Nepali. The people from 514, they started visiting this area. And what they realized was there was no women in that community between the ages of 13 and 30. Why? Because they'd all been sold into human trafficking. When those families had crises, no one wants to sell their children into slavery, but traffickers had come through, and the women had been trafficked out of that village. So what the 514 ministry realized was that what these villagers needed was an enterprise. They needed it was an economic route to this human trafficking issue. And what they needed was a business. And so they started a trekking business, a tourism company, and they contracted with the villagers to provide homestays, to host tourists that came. And the whole community has been transformed. Since that business started working in that area, not one girl has been trafficked into slavery. I have a 15-year-old daughter. Man. And this is how transformation is happening throughout the world. And since the village now has a sign, no traffickers here, and some of the traffickers that were coming through are now in jail, and the business and the community is going from strength to strength, and a small group have come to know the Lord, and a church has restarted in that community. And I'm hoping to share a few more stories, but you'll hear stories all day today about what God is doing to bring transformation in communities through people, through entrepreneurs that have courage and are responding to God's call, God's heart, to bring the whole gospel into communities. So business as mission is a concept, it's a practice, it's happening around the world every day, and we need to be praying for you that are BAM practitioners and praying for those who are running BAM companies around the world. It's also a global movement, and I want to share just briefly about that as I come to a close. It's been growing. I mean, Bill is here, and he is our grandfather in business as mission. He's been doing, 37 years, something like that? Right, he's going to share some of that story. So there were pioneers out there doing business as mission a long time ago. But in the late 90s, about 25 years ago, there started to be a stirring around the world. People began to think, oh, there's other people doing this. They came up with the term business as mission, and then people recognized that. And they started to have, this is a map showing some of the development around the world. We've got regional, national, that's you up there in Northern Europe, BAM Netherlands. And then we've got these international networks that are coming around different topics. Things like, the BAM Romania team are here, and they've got BAM Connect, and they're doing BAM Romania. But then we have industry groups like Coffee as Mission, and groups looking at specifically at human trafficking and BAM, and various interest networks. So that's happening. But in the last 20 to 25 years, what we've seen is a maturing movement that's coming around the world. And it's happened because we've come up with a common language. We've started to meet together. There's been communication and collaboration, and I'm just delighted to be here with BAM Netherlands. We've been in the BAM Global Network. We've just been watching and seeing what you guys have been doing for the last sort of 4, 5, 6 years. And you're bringing that common language and communication and collaboration and coming together here in the Netherlands. And that is happening in places all around the world. And this is, together as we do that, and that's why I'm glad to be here, as we connect what we're doing with one another, there can be greater impact. And business as mission is, Mark's my colleague, he says it's poly times 3. It's polycentric. There's no one place. The Holy Spirit is at work stirring up everywhere around the world. It speaks many languages. I'm speaking English, you're speaking in Dutch. Some of the earliest BAM networks spoke Korean and Bahasa in Indonesia. And it's polydirectional. It's going everywhere to everywhere. And what I'm really excited about, and I'll close with this, is that we've got this next generation coming up who have this integrated thinking. In the early days of business as mission, we had people from a mission background who really maybe had to learn about business as they went along, and people from a business background who brought their entrepreneurial gifts in, and then were collaborating and partnering together. But now we're seeing in the next generation come up, who young people, young professionals in universities and colleges who are saying, I know you have called me, Lord, to business, and I know you've called me to the nations. How do you want to equip me so that I can go and make an impact through business as mission? So I'll leave you with that. And yeah, that's just an introduction to some of what we're seeing through business as mission.
Thanks. Is het niet geweldig om zo even te horen wat gebeurt er eigenlijk allemaal en waarom zijn we hier? En als iemand is die daar iets over kan zeggen, is zij dat wel. En dus ik wil je echt aanmoedigen om als je straks gaat kiezen welke workshop en zo wil ik gaan doen, om ook even te kijken naar haar workshops. Zonder de andere tekort te doen natuurlijk, want die hebben ook iets belangrijks.